Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. Monday night, back in action, a quiet weekend, but we are back. I'm your host, as always, Timushin here in Chicago. Nice weather out there. We even went for a walk and everything. So spring is almost around the corner, people, even though it was cold as hell yesterday. Really beautiful day over here in the Chicagoland. Windy as hell, but it is the windy city. Gally, what's happening?
It's cold as hell, and you can keep your warm weather to yourself. No, we did too. I said it to Bickler on the Premier League show. We had a 50-degree day, which in the Northeast basically means you think it's like 75, 80, and you go out in like a short sleeve shirt and no jacket, and then 5 minutes into it, you're like, fuck, it's really only 49, and I lied to myself to convince myself it was 50. But and then it went back to 20 degrees and rainy this morning. So, yeah, suck it.
Yeah, it's almost there. I mean, it's one of those 55 feels like 22 kind of. I love when they do that. They're like, it's 60, but it feels like 30. So it's actually 30. Bickler, what's happening? You got the hoodie and everything. It looks like cold in that room, man.
Yeah, it was like 70 this weekend, and that dipped in. I woke up this morning and had to scrape ice off the car, which, listen, we didn't lose a Civil War to have to do that, so I don't understand what's happening.
Oh man, but hey, weekend was actually nice overall too. I mean, it was cold and everything, but I don't know. It's beginning of March, man. It's growing pains. Not as much to talk about since obviously there wasn't a weekend game. So I figured we kind of like look at some of the bigger picture stuff. Obviously, we have the Champions League coming up in 2 days over here, so we'll take a look at that as well throughout the show. But first, the piano, and most importantly, trivia. Actually, this is an eye-opening one. It might open up some conversation as well. And it's going to be interesting to see who gets them in the audience as well. If you're watching us live right now, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up and share. Go grab some other friends, bring their butt over here as well. And if you're listening to the podcast, make sure to tune into our YouTube and subscribe over there, because obviously there's a lot more content we throw out on YouTube that don't all get published as a podcast. Okay, so over 33 Premier League seasons, how many teams have been at the top spots, number one, numero uno, like we are right now, at the end of February at least twice? How many teams have done it? They've been top of the league at the end of February at least twice. And obviously, I'm going to need you guys to name them as well so that, we know we got them. Bickler, we'll start with you. We'll go one at a time. There's a bunch of teams, but maybe not as much as you would think.
Name them one, like keep going together instead of trying to guess the number.
Yes, let's go. All right. What we got?
All right, Manchester City's the easy one.
Manchester United.
What was that?
Manchester United.
Okay, back to you.
Liverpool.
Back to you, Gally.
Chelsea.
Pickleball.
Chelsea.
Back to you.
Arsenal.
Back to you.
This is where I start to come to. I'm gonna. Newcastle.
Bickler.
Yes.
Son of a bitch.
You know,
I knew how big. I knew how big a lead of this. I knew they blew some big leads.
We're gonna get to the irony of this. Actually, go ahead, Bickler.
Not Leicester. Gosh. I have no idea.
How many more do we have, Tim?
I don't know. Let's get Bickler's guess first, and then I'll.
Okay.
I don't think there are any more. I don't have any off the top of my head. I guess this Southampton, considering the fact that this next game, and hoping that we're tying this trivia into that somehow. But I don't think
those traps were the old days where I tried to. Actually, the Newcastle is not even in them either. No. It's only 5 teams, which I actually find shocking as well. It's only 5 teams. So maybe we are in a Farmers League, people. There are 5 teams have done it at least twice. 4 times for Liverpool, Arsenal, and City. Chelsea have done it 6. United has done it 11 seasons. And the last time they did it was 13 years ago in the 2012-2013. So actually, it's only 5 teams that have done it more than 2. So I kind of want to keep going to see what you guys would throw as guess. Newcastle actually was not a bad one, but Newcastle only has done it once. Newcastle,
they blew it that second time during February. They weren't there at the end of February. Okay. I knew they had
Villa
it at
has
least
done it
once.
92-93. Blackburn Rovers, somebody had it in the comments. I think it was Ryan, once, 94-95. And then Leicester City did it in like 14-15. What does that make you guys think in terms of the Premier League? Is it really top heavy, or 5 teams is probably a lot more than any other league can say?
Well, I'm pretty sure that there have been in the last 6 or 7 years in Italy, 5 different teams have the lead at the end of February because they've had 4 consecutive years with different champions, I think, with AC Milan, Inter Milan, Napoli. Oh, no, Atalanta came up short last year. But you know what I mean? Like, Italy has had a little bit more of it. My gut tells me that La Liga hasn't had more than 3 in that same amount of time.
Yeah, I don't think League One has had more than 1.
And probably
there was that one year when
Mbappe,
when Mbappe was still there at Monaco. They had that one year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then that 1 year Pochettino was coach at PSG and Lille won.
I mean, you would think Bundesliga is probably 2 or 3. We'll get our Statman BJ on this. Actually, this is like an interesting study
to see what the
other leagues have had.
That's a good question, though, because I guess my question to you is does that mean that this league, because the top 5 or 6 have been the top 5 or 6 for as long as they have, but if you think about it, outside of when United was on the big run, and they haven't done it in 13 years.
Yeah.
So it almost shows that we've had a lot of these, because Chelsea didn't win the league every time they were ahead of it at the end of February. Yep. Liverpool surely didn't win it if they've done it 4 times. So in some ways, it almost says to me this league is as competitive as we believe it is, because even those leads aren't these 11, 12, 13-point type leads that are processions to a title, which we might be dealing with right now. A lot of times these are 2, 3-point leads. Like Arsenal, I'm pretty sure was top of the league at the end of February last season, if not the last 2 seasons, I think.
Last season for sure. Had to go back and see, but I mean, I guess initially, Bickler, when I read the answers, I was like, really, only 5? It didn't seem like a lot, but when I look at other leagues, when you compare it to other leagues, you're like, actually, that's not that bad. I guess what does it say about the other leagues more than what it says about the Premier League?
We should take all those teams and make a Super League.
Cha-ching! Yeah, that's $1 million, $1 billion idea that they're working on. But yeah, that's kind of Liverpool was a point ahead of Arsenal last season, says BJ. Really, I thought they were ahead of the game. But I mean, yeah, I feel like I say, on paper, when you look at it, 5. That's it, 5. But still, that's a lot for compared to most other leagues. And like I say, there's ultimately 9 teams that have been there at the end of February. And February, I mean, that's pretty late, man. That's like 2.5, 3 months to go in the season over here. So that's pretty like late in the season to be able to still be on top of the league. But thanks to BJ again. That's another great question, I thought. And like I say, the answer was a little shocking to me. So we're definitely going to talk about the PSG lineup. And I think it's a no-brainer. We'll probably mostly agree, I would think, in terms of like the starting lineup being our strongest lineup. And we'll discuss what that strongest lineup is. Probably only really in the 9th spot is probably where we'll have the discussion, it feels like. But I was asking this to the Polish Prince this morning. So I'll ask it to you guys. Gali, I'll start with you. Knowing the Southampton game is sandwiched in the middle between these 2 Champions League matchups, and knowing the point lead we have, and then maybe because it is Southampton as well, do you almost take this weekend as a rotation piece and focused on the Champions League games? Or is it too early to do that? Is it a wrong message to send to the team to do that against Southampton this weekend?
No, I don't think it's the wrong message to send as long as you're doing it strategically. So we're going to talk about the PSG lineup. I think there's 2 or 3 players that could argue would try to fight their way into that first 11 for a big match. Like, there's only a couple spots up for grabs. We talk about it, right? Can Jones wield himself in? Is it Jota? Is it Diaz through the middle if you're playing Gakpo on the left? And other than that, it's pretty much the only 2 players. So I think you have to go with your strongest 11 on Wednesday, and you need to do some subtle rotation on the weekend. I am sick and tired of hearing no rotation unless there's injuries. Sorry, Sir Z. I hear this all the time, and then I watch other teams roll guys out every 72 hours and start to see injuries. Let's knock on something of wood-like substance. We've had the least amount of injuries and minutes lost of any club in the Premier League. One of the least amount of minutes lost for any club in Europe. I think some of that is down to training tactics. I think some of that is down to the way that we're playing now. That doesn't mean we're infallible to these types of injuries. And you keep seeing them happening regularly around football, and we're still playing tons of matches. We have a ton of matches coming. I am not afraid of losing this league, and I'm surely not afraid of doing it to away trips to Southampton. And I've said this before. If you drop points against clubs like Southampton and guys like Harvey Elliott, guys like Simicast, even Kwanzaa can't give you minutes to rest bodies, then they don't belong at this club, and you're learning everything you need to learn about them. And to me, you have to make at least 3 or 4 changes when the weekend comes, and that would be the prudent decision. Playing the same 11 Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday is a huge mistake.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, no rotation unless there are injuries is basically no rotation until there are injuries, and that's like a wrong formula to find out, because I think a lot of teams are fine. And honestly, I go back to last season. I feel like the biggest issue was rushing some of these guys back early, and then we bounced them again. I think it was like Trent, for example, one that comes to mind. I think we did it with Diaz, where he came back early, was gone again. I'm not counting Jota because he could have been like gone out even if we didn't rotate or whatever. But, you know, there was like a lot of times where that happened. So you don't want that, because I think some of these clubs, you see the snowball effect when you have injuries. So now you throw a guy out there who's not used to minutes, and he gives you 2 90s back to back. Now he's injured. Before you know it, you have like injuries snowballing. Does the score line on Wednesday, Bickler, affect that decision making at all going into the weekend? Or do you kind of like look at the Southampton game? Like I say, the fact that it's Southampton, I think, makes it trickier, because if it was a different game, like, and if it was a Villa matchup or something like that, I'm assuming our tune would be slightly different.
Yeah, our tune would probably be different. I think that, like, to me, I'm handling them independently, though. I'm essentially going with a stronger variation of the lineup we played against Plymouth and telling players like Harvey Elliott that, like, you know, that can't happen again. Like, that performance can't happen. Like, we need to be able to put the Curtis Joneses in, the Harvey Elliott's, and the Endos in, and the Kwanzas in, and for them to play as if they're part of the squad and not be a noticeable drop like we saw versus Plymouth. So I'm probably handling them separately. I agree with Gally. I think you have to rotate in that spot. Play your strongest 11 in the match that, you know, this is the big match, and then you roll into a team that's been historically bad this year. And if your depth can't match what they can, then we've got problems to address this summer.
And that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the summer, and we'll probably touch about like a couple of them, because I feel like some of the transfer talk has started way too early to my liking. But at this point, you would think, Gally, that decisions have been made. Like, if, you know, whether in terms of like players like Harvey, even Chiesa maybe to a certain extent, but definitely a player like Harvey who's available as well. Like, in terms of, are we going to keep going with them or whatever? So whatever they do from this point on really is not going to change that decision making. If he goes against Southampton and has a huge game, I don't think Slot is looking at it and be like, oh, maybe there's a use for him, kind of a deal. If that decision hasn't made in terms of moving on from certain players, I feel like we're in March now. I think you have kind of like completed your job application. There's no edits at this point for some of these guys. whether it's Costas or
Yeah.
Elliott or
I do. I don't think the squad players that are on the fringes or the players who have struggled to nail down a starting spot have some like open audition that gives them a chance, right? Now, if Harvey Elliott is called upon 5-6 times between now and the end of the season and puts in meaningful performances, gives the manager something else to think about with regards to the tactics, could he maybe work himself back into the definitely sold to maybe on the way out list? Like, could you move levels? Maybe. Do I think Simicast is changing anything? No. Do I think Jota injury record is going to change the way the manager relies on him or thinks about him? I don't. Same with Darwin. But to be fair, the manager keeps sending Darwin out there, even though we're all saying, can we give Chiesa some time? Can we see what we have in Chiesa? And the manager's like, hey, people, I saw what I had in the Italian job, and he doesn't do the job. Like, can we just leave that guy somewhere else? We'll be sending him somewhere else because at this point, he'd get minutes, right? Like, he'd be getting minutes. Because if you're not getting minutes over a player like Darwin, who the manager is ripping in post-match press conferences for effort, and then he gets on the pitch in the next match ahead of you, the manager is basically telling you everything he thinks about you.
I don't know. See, can't you look at that another way and say you're putting one of them on the window to sell, the other one is in the back house, in the warehouse, because you have like different long-term plans for him?
Maybe you could say that. My argument would be you put a guy out in the shop window when you think he can do something to raise his value. And every time you put Darwin Nunez out there and let more people see him, I think you remind people the player they don't want to buy, not the skill set that they're looking for. Because it's not like he's doing anything to add to any of these plays. I don't think it fits. I think the manager has zero desire. I think this is an evident one. There were people who said this was a club signing because of the cost, and the manager really didn't need a sixth attacker and an Italian winger. And I personally feel like this almost looks to me like Slot has had no intention, because there has been a healthy Chiesa for almost 6 weeks, and he has gotten zero sniffs, even though we had injuries. We had a down Darwin and injuries to Gakpo and Jota, and he still wasn't even getting 5-10 minutes of run out there. I personally, Paul, maybe I'm crazy, I personally feel like the manager has kind of laid his cards out with Chiesa, almost the way he has with Harvey Elliott, because we've all questioned when will he get a chance. And I don't think the manager has any intention of giving either of them one. But maybe I'm totally wrong here.
I mean, with Darwin, though, answer this at the same time too, Bickler. With Darwin, I feel like, if there are Saudi clubs out there willing to pay for him, they already know what they're getting, right? It's not a secret that suddenly, like we've been. They can freaking ask us or go watch the Thursday night podcast if they wanted to find out about Nunez.
Probably
they
should
ask a Liverpool fan that we can tell them the struggles over the last years. They are buying what they would feel that, the physical traits are still there. And, they're going to be going after, they'll work with us. It's just not working with Liverpool or maybe the Premier League. Kind of like the same reasons we bought him for, if you will. But
yeah,
I'll find out.
I think, I don't know. With Darwin, you obviously have time on your side with him, given his age, right? I think he can. It's weird to me because I don't feel like he fits in a system as structured as this one, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like it's got to have. It's got to be a system where the roles are meant for some interpretation, right? And like he has that freedom that he doesn't have in this. The Chiesa thing's a weird thing to me because I like the player and I think he's a great player and I don't understand why he doesn't play more. The only thing that to Galley's point, it feels to me like the old committee signing where we would say a player was forced on Klopp and Klopp didn't want him and we never saw him. That's what it feels like. It feels like a player like that he didn't want necessarily. And so he just kind of has he goes in there and it's like a can of refried beans you didn't know you had. You're like, oh, I gotta do this tonight. And he grabs it every once in a while. It just doesn't make sense to me.
The moment you said that, Gally and I can just picture that famous pot in the background that we always see something in there. It's either chili or now we find out it's beans. But
Reminds me, where's
Nunez,
Patrick?
the issue with Nunez, I feel like, is, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's just not, I don't want to say smart enough. That sounds like too insulting. That's not, like he's not dumb.
It's okay. It's okay to say it. He's a dummy.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like what Slot does, and going back to what Bickler was saying, Gally, like he's more of a, like, cause the chaos. We run on chaos anyway, kind of a deal, as opposed to, hey, you know how we were doing 4-3-3? We just switching to 4-4-2 right now. So that's what you're gonna go to. Look at your charts, E5. That's what we're gonna do now, and that's not gonna work with him in terms of. I mean, he already takes like the worst pressing angles and stuff. So, I mean, the fact that he wasn't there in the City game, I think it just says everything you need to know in terms of how like apt he is in terms of like, like tactically learning things and all that kind. He's not that kind of a player that you can put in different structures and now we're playing like this compared to Jota, for example, who can adjust to whatever the tactics are. But whoever is after him right now probably already knows that, and they're after a guy who can cause the chaos, run, be physical, get the crowd going, entertaining to watch.
It's absolutely entertaining to watch. I thought of this the other day. I don't know what match I was watching, and I thought to myself, where Darwin would fit in like perfectly, and maybe it's just because I want to see, like I jokingly made the comment about, could you imagine him at Napoli, like him playing for Antonio Conte, like the two of them, if they ever had a dust up. But I actually think like he might actually fit in at Atletico Madrid. One, because I don't think they ask their players to think that much other than to run really hard, kick people even harder, and if nobody's looking, kick them again. And I also think if there was ever a manager that could actually kind of harness the craziness of Darwin, it might be Diego Simeone. Like, because in the way they play almost like that Portuguese style, what he did when he was at Benfica, where he played off of another striker. Like, I could see him and Julian Alvarez actually working okay together at times and kind of playing kind of that Spanish style 4-4-2 that only Atletico plays, right? They sort of press, they don't press. Like I said, they press just hard enough to kick people in the shins. Yeah. And then they find ways to score goals, and they score hectic, crazy. And I almost feel like he would fit in with their supporters. He would fit in that not Real Madrid, but still Madrid mentality. Like, it's those type of clubs, because I don't think Darwin is going to go to Saudi. I know everyone said he wanted that move. Paul made the comment, maybe he's that dumb and young, he wants the money. I just feel like he's going to want another shot at a club in Europe before he goes and plays in Oblivion. And maybe I'm completely wrong there, but it seems to me like Darwin's career has a much better trajectory if he finds another club to actually fight for a role at than go to a club that basically is going to make him the second or third highest paid player. Because I don't think that bodes well for him. Because I think he's proven he isn't ready to live up to a big price tag because he couldn't do it here.
Yeah, but over there, everybody has a big price tag, to be fair. You know what I mean? Everybody is making big money. So I don't think he would feel the same pressure he's feeling at Liverpool. And it could be just, building the market up for him and saying like, hey, the Saudis are interested. So whoever else is interested in them forks out more money.
Well, that's what I always
think
felt
like we kind of feel like either way, it's just not fitting and it's not going to work. And he rarely throws people under the bus, and he already did once. So probably another winning formula there, and he will probably be gone in the summer, given there's a good offer. But the Chiesa thing is different, Bickler, because I remember a couple of months ago when we first had sightings of Chiesa, I remember actually talking on a Monday night podcast saying he's probably the closest thing that you and I were talking about, like to Szoboszlai in terms of like skill sets. That's a lot more closer than, for example, Elliott is. Are we like kind of giving up on that project too fast?
No, I mean, I agree that, I just feel like there's got to be some training we're not seeing. You know what I mean? That's the only thing that makes sense to me, because he does so many of those things that no other player on that team does out on the pitch. That sort of ability to knit those two, the midfield and the forward line, and do a lot of those things that Szoboszlai does from a running standpoint. So it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure. Are we giving up too early? Or is the manager giving up too early? This is the manager in the middle of the title run. So I'm certainly don't want to be critical of this, because I feel like there's got to be something that we don't see. There's got to be some sort of clear disconnect in the way that he plays and the system demands of what Slot's looking for. I just don't know what it is.
And to be fair, it's not experiment time anymore, Gally. And I think maybe that's part of the ordeal. The experiment time was the PSV game. Maybe if he kept going on the FA Cup, it was FA Cup and stuff like that. There's no experiment time now. I mean, going back to the title race and stuff like that, maybe once you put this thing in the bag, right? The last 4 or 5 weeks, kind of like we did Curtis Jones. Remember, he was he needs a run of games. Yep. That's maybe when we see Chiesa and Getsak. I feel like out of the names we were talking about, remember we just said in terms of an audition to be able to show themselves. I feel like he has never really gotten the audition because he's never really played with, I don't know, Gravenberch and McAllister behind them where he does that Szoboszlai role or whatever. He hasn't gotten a really good test, but it could be what Bickler is saying. Something is happening on the training pitch that Slot is just not liking.
I think the manager doesn't believe he has the legs to do the job that Szoboszlai can do. I mean, we criticize Curtis Jones when he plays that role because he can't run like Szoboszlai, because who can run like a madman that runs the whole damn game? And I do think we talk about this before too. I think, when we talk about what type of players are we looking to jettison out, what type of players, it's also about what are those players that need to come into this squad? And I think there's a real need, especially if you were to change up the strikers. If you move Nunez out and Jota out, and there's more reports right now that the manager has given up on Jota than there are given up on Darwin, and they're credible reports. So it's basically the manager has made it clear to the board, I can't take players who aren't fit. And we all know Jota's not fit, and he's only getting older. And I think the manager knows, I tried to rely on this guy to be the leading number 9 at my club. And I had to put a bleeping left wing that runs like a chicken with his head cut off at center forward position, because I got a striker who can't hit the net, and I got a striker who can't be fit enough to play 5 matches out of 30. And I think if you go out and you get an Isak, if you go out and you buy, Eteteke or whatever his name is, the kid from Frankfurt, right? If you go buy some of these strikers, I think you almost need a second Dominic Szoboszlai, because once you change that up, I think you need someone doing that running, that work. And I think that Jones has kind of solidified. I think Jones has showed on Slot, I'm a 4th or 5th midfielder, but I'm a backup for Gravenberch and McAllister. As an emergency, I can back up Szoboszlai. Yeah. So I almost feel like where we used to think it was a Zubamendi type to offer more to Gravenberch, more to Mac, I almost feel like if you have to, Endo has proven he can do the job in the short periods of time on the pitch. And if you keep him, you keep him. He's a veteran. He won't cause problems. I think the most important thing from a midfield is a legitimate number 2 for Szoboszlai that can actually keep up the work rate and running he does when he's not on the pitch. Because to me, we look a completely different side when he's not playing, whether it's because he got subbed off or he gets a rest. And I think that's a problem, because I'd argue outside of Mo and Virgil, Szoboszlai is the 3rd most important player right now in this setup.
And it's kind of really hard to replace. There are not a lot of guys who can, not only run, this is not Milner, run with pace and physicality and then be good on the ball and technically savvy and stuff like that. So that is a hard guy to find, and that's probably a high price tag unless you go find a young dude that you feel like your scouts say it fits the mold kind of a deal. I guess my thing going into the summer, Bickler, is we still really don't know a whole lot about. We're basically looking at the current team right now and saying, this guy doesn't fit, this guy doesn't fit. But I don't even know, because let's face it, in summer we said, hey, we're probably going to see that makeshift version of Slot's football because he had a short summer. All these guys were in the Euro and stuff. So is this maybe this is not what he wants at the end of the day, but in a in a pinch over here, like he went to the refrigerator and made some pasta. He's like, I got everything for this. He looked at what the players he had. We can play this with these guys, and come summer now I know we'll get the pieces. But I don't even know, for example, what kind of a right back, left back he wants. We feel like we know what kind of a midfield he wants, but I don't know what he wants out of a 9 and stuff like that. I think that makes the summer extremely hard to project because everybody's talking Isak. We don't know if Slot is like, no, that's not the kind of guy I want.
Yeah, I think he built a house with Klopp's lumber, but I don't think like the framework of what he wants to build looks anything like this. Like, I really don't. I think if my suspicion is that his blueprint for how he wants to build this side probably looks very different. The most glaring position aside from striker is probably fullback. I don't think there's a fullback on the side that does what he wants him to do. And I think probably the front line operates entirely differently than he wants it to operate. Now, maybe he adjusts that if we get a certain contract signed and like play runs through that side like it always does. I mean, he may adjust tactics there. But yeah, my suspicion is that like there's a lot of things that we're not privy to and aware of in terms of like how he likes to set up. I think it probably looks very different from this side in the next couple of years, not just from a personnel standpoint, but from a tactics standpoint.
And that's why this summer becomes very tricky, Gally, because hard to project because we really don't know what he has in mind on what kind of a profile he does want. We're basing everything based off currently what we're seeing and who doesn't fit, who's not playing and stuff like that. But ultimately what he's done is he's taken a squad, he's looked at it, and he's come up with a way where he has kind of like fixed a lot of the deficiencies defensively and stuff like that, kept a lot of the good things, added a little bit, tweaked it, and maybe adjusted it to get the most out of a guy like Trent, most out of the guy like Mo and stuff like that. Because maybe that's not what he wants, but when you have Mo, you got to play like this kind of a setup. I mean, he's even said it like in one of the interviews when he was talking about Trent and stuff like that. Like, not in midfield, this is where you want. If he passes from this wide position, you want him wide there and stuff like that. It makes summer very, very hard to say that's probably not a guy he wants. That's probably not a guy he wants because we really don't know ultimately what he would do with a full summer.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think when you look at the history of the type of players he has coached and the way he's coached them, he's a lot more aligned with a right back like Bradley than he is one like Trent. He is. Like that, to me, I feel like Trent makes the most sense, which is part of the reason why I feel like we hear the most from Slot talking about how they want to keep Mo and how important Virgil is to this setup. And I've never actually heard him go to the podium and give a big speech about Trent ever. Not once. And maybe that's because he knows he's gone. And he's like, he's Dutch. Yeah. He's Dutch, and he's like, I'm not wasting my time. I'm talking to the players who still want to be here. I'm coaching the other ones. I mean, I made that comment where, one of the reporters said once, like, all Trent wants is to win the Ballon d'Or and be an attacking midfielder, and all Arne Slot wants is Trent to be a right back. It makes a lot of sense, and I think Paul's right. I do think the fullback play will completely change. And I think that fullback play will probably alter what he asks of the midfield. And to your point, Timichin, I think as this side evolves, there'll be even less of a place for a player like Endo. But maybe playing in this type of world where the fullbacks still do the things they do. So you need someone to like kind of be an adult at the back of the room and hang back and do some defending. Endo offers you that as a veteran who can come off the bench and give you strong minutes. I think it's not surprising to me that Slot is starting to rely on the veterans in the room when it comes to seeing these matches out. Because I think he has seen that as good as Jones is, he still sometimes has a mistake in him. As great as this guy or that, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't want to bring Kwanzaa in a spot that he doesn't have to. I think in a big spot, he'd have as much faith going to Endo at right back right now. as he would going to some kid, because he knows the job that guy will do. And I think when it comes to next summer, I believe it's probably four signings with the assumption that Virgil and Mo stay. I'm hanging my hat on Virgil and Mo are staying. And then it's probably a couple attackers, a midfielder, a defender. I'd like to see more than one, but it's going to be really, really interesting. But I have to ask you this because we never talk about it, but it's the only player we signed last year. What do you think this man does at the goalkeeping position next year? Because to me, it's the biggest story of the summer. Because you have 4 keepers, if you count Mamadashvili, along with Kelleher, along with Yaros and Allison. And I think you could make an argument that at some point this season, someone has tried to convince me that all 4 of them will be sold this summer.
No, that's just freaking crazy talk. I mean,
no, not all 4. At a different point this season, someone has tried to convince me.
Oh, okay. I was like,
they're selling Allison, or they bought Mamadashvili just as an investment. They're going to move on from him. Kelleher's going to go. Like, all I keep hearing is what they do. But to me, I think it's one of the biggest stories because people don't realize it's 1 year left on Allison's deal after this season.
So and that's why I feel like
again.
It really depends on what would happen in the summer. I really think, if you get an offer for Ali, similar to what Ederson got last year, and it's a lot more likely that Ali would get that now over a declining Ederson, for example, right? I think you kind of like take that, and I don't know if then depends if the manager is sold as Keller as being his starter, and then you can bring Mamadashvili to be the backup, or at least like compete for it and stuff. I don't even know if Kelleher would want a guaranteed number 1 spot and not want a guy they just spent 30, because you didn't spend 30 on him to just come in and just keep loaning him out either. I don't think his form right now will have a lot to do with it, because I mean, I know like people are looking at numbers and stuff like that, but he's playing in that league behind that defense. I mean, I guess he made some, I saw like a tweet or something like that. He made some like a mistake this weekend and stuff like that. Okay, somebody can say Kelleher made a mistake at the end of Newcastle and put a tweet out. If you're not following the league, we would say the same thing. So I don't know how much stock we put into that. I don't know how much we stock put into what his current form is. I really do think it depends on who people come in for. I would think Ali would have a huge market this summer, especially in the Saudi league, and that will be a better, smarter way to cash in as opposed to like moving Kelleher or something like that, who probably wants to move. Brian says we'll never see the Georgian in our kits.
Oh. He's been saying this in Discord. I'll give him credit. He said this since the day we signed him. It makes no sense to me. I was one who said maybe you're buying him with it's almost like the investment model with the idea that we move forward. Personally, I've said this before. I don't think you'll ever see Kelleher wear that kit again after Wembley. I think he starts at Wembley, and I know Paul's upset about that. And Paul would start Allison because it's a chance to win a trophy. And I'm a little bit still on the fence. Sir Z was telling me that the manager said for sure Kelleher's starting Wembley, and it's his competition. I feel like it's your chance as a brand new manager to win your first trophy. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you remember him not catching that ball at Newcastle. And in your head, you just think like, I want the world-class keeper in goal at Wembley because I'm not going to have
against Newcastle.
I just, for me, like in my mind, I feel like that, but they're telling me Kelleher's going to start. I don't believe he'll ever appear for this club again after that match. I could be, unless maybe he gets a random start down the end of the season.
What if Ali is sold? Like, what if you go with that scenario? Like, Saudi has come in 60 million for Ali or something like that. 1 year left on the contract. We take the money and run. What's
I don't know that. I don't know Kelleher. I don't think Kelleher will sign another deal. He said some nasty things about the club at the end of the last transfer window. He said things about how he's felt like they've held him back. They stopped him from getting first team football. He feels like his international career has been set back by them. I don't know that he loves playing at this club the way we think he loves playing at this club. And I think if there's talk of Chelsea coming in for him, Spurs coming in, these aren't small clubs. Juventus was supposedly interested. To me, if Alisson gets sold, in my opinion, Mamardashvili is the number one next season to start. I don't love that idea. I personally would keep Ali for another year. I think I'd keep Ali for another year. I'd make Yaros the number 2, and I'd send Mamardashvili out on loan in the Premier League so he can actually learn the league, learn England, work through the defenses, the way it works, the speed, the pace, make some mistakes at Bournemouth, and then I would bring him in. I believe they bought that man to be the long-term replacement for Alisson. Until I see something different, that's going to be what I think. I just was wondering what your guys' take were.
Yeah, it's not like the smallest investment either, Bickler. I mean, you could say turn around, and if he was like, I guess in good form, that would be more of a better investment right now. But I mean, he was like highly sought after at the time. You could you could sell him and even out, maybe not lose money on the deal. But do you bring him in to be the backup to Ali? Because that means, knowing Ali, he's going to be playing for a couple of months at least.
It's weird to me that we always ask for a succession plan on these players. We finally get one and then we shit on it. So like I don't know why everybody's so down on this. And I don't know why everyone's so the Keller thing's weird to me. I don't know why everybody loves that guy as a keeper. I think he's had some great moments for the club. I think if he wasn't Irish and people didn't know the story about he was a classically trained striker, people wouldn't give a shit. I just think people pick and choose what they want to glom onto. The Kelleher thing doesn't make any sense to me. I think he doesn't want to be at the club. Like Ali said, I think that Kelleher wants to be somewhere where he is the guy. And I don't think Kelleher is ever going to be that at Liverpool.
Yeah, probably not.
Just because of the personalities and the amount of talent in this squad currently, I don't think he's ever going to be considered the guy. Which he's made very clear that he wants to be the Ireland number 1. So I think that rules him out. It doesn't make sense to me to spend the amount of money on this guy that we spent, bury him as an asset, and then try to sell him later when we clearly got a dwindling contract. Just doesn't make sense unless you have somebody lined up down the transfer pipe that you like better, and this was just essentially a backup plan or a safety valve. Doesn't make sense. I think that he's got to be the future number 1 in terms of how we've done the transfer. It makes sense. And I agree with Gally. It makes sense to have him come in and loan him out to a Bournemouth or one of those mid to low table teams that's gonna have a solid defense, a decent enough defense in front of him that he has something to build off of, and while he gets familiar with the stadiums and the clubs and the physicality and the style of play in the Premier League.
I mean, the thing that, in the comments, I see it too, that, it just doesn't on paper seem like a good fit because he's not as good with his feet. That was something that, I know Turkey played against him and stuff in the national team. I don't follow La Liga as much and watch him there, but he was pretty brutal in terms of distribution, which obviously is very key now. But in some way, I think, the reason Kelleher had become Kelleher is when you have a guy like Ali, who's one of the, if not the best in the world, he goes down and you're bummed because it was an extended time. And then this guy comes in like a superhero and you're shocked that, we don't really fall a huge line. So it becomes a bigger story, I think, because I don't think anybody expected it.
But is he a superhero? Or is he playing in front of the greatest center back in the history of the Premier League and arguably one of the best partnerships right now in Konate and Van Dijk? This is the other part that gets lost in all this. Why was everyone made a huge deal about Aaron Ramsdale getting jettisoned out by Arsenal, right? After having what was a record season for an English keeper in goals conceded. Because they brought in Raya. And to be fair, Raya is a better keeper. He makes Arsenal better. But the reason does Aaron Ramsdale look like Aaron Ramsdale playing at Southampton? He doesn't. He looks like a mediocre keeper. And I don't think, and I've said this and I'll say it again, get mad at me, Irish contingency in Discord. Kelleher would have conceded more goals at Leicester City this year than Hermansen. Because he's not as good of a goalkeeper as Hermansen. And I genuinely believe that. I think he's a very good goalkeeper. Very good. He's a number 2 at a big, big club. I don't know what Mamardashvili is, but I know this. This group had a chance to sign deals, sell Allison, and promote Kelleher. They've never done it. And to be fair, the same guys, Edwards and them, they brought Kelleher in, and they didn't fast track him then either. And he loses homegrown status at the end of the season, which means now he carries a European place in our squad, which is a huge difference from being homegrown and holding an English position in this squad. So now you're talking about having to sell a Jota or sell a Robertson to keep him here. And these are the things I don't think we think about when we build up like the makeups of a squad. And I do think we have built up Kelleher, to Spencer's comment, for his magical moments in cup runs and some big, big saves. I don't think we've actually thought about it from like what it does to the squad and what it actually brings. And his value has always been more for me as a sellable item than he is as a long-term part of the future. Or maybe I'm just
said like 2 different things though. Like you can't say he's not that great of a goalie, but that he's been a good goalie and gave some great moment. I think he's done well. I think you're really on like shooting him down for his performances. I think he's done well. Any goal, I mean, if he can go back and give like alley errors and stuff too, he's done really, really well. I know he's playing behind a good defense, but like I think he's a better than. I think he would be a starter in a lot of Premier League teams, and I probably would be as well. I think he's a good goalie. We're not maybe seeing it, or the powers that be in the club might not be seeing him as the long-term goalie for the next 5 seasons and stuff like that. But I think, calling him average or not a good goalie, I think it's like really harsh.
I think the difference is there's a good portion of our Discord channel that would make the argument he's a top 5 keeper in this league, which is absolutely.
Yeah, but we know the bias behind that, don't we? I mean, I'm not.
But forget the Irish part. I've heard he was top. He was a top. It was literally the best backup keeper in the world. Like we've said these things based on a handful. He's had less than 50 appearances, and I look at that and I say to myself, do you believe if he started 38 matches, this side would be at the top of the Premier League? I don't. And I'm sorry, I'll stay on that. I'll die on that vine.
I understand that. But here's my thing. He is doing this in the Premier League so what does he have to do for you to say, like, he's not going to stab Ali and take over? Like, what is he going to do as your backup goalie for you to consider him to be a top goalie? That probably, I mean, do you agree that he'd
have to be the starter
job in most Premier League?
You got to go. I think any backup goalie has to go be a starter somewhere else and prove they can do it over a season or 2. He hasn't been given that chance.
No, but I mean, that's not on him, though. I'm just saying what he can do as a goalie. What more could he have done as a backup to Ali? I don't think you get any better than that from a backup goalie. And expecting it, I don't understand. That doesn't seem fair to me. What could have he done that you would be like, yes, he's really good?
I think he's pretty consistently struggled with his positioning. Like, I think he's conceded a lot of goals just based on bad positioning.
But I think, are we comparing that? We're comparing him to Ali, which doesn't seem fair. You're comparing him to like the best, if not, I mean, definitely like the top.
So your question was, as a backup keeper, what could he do better? And I said his positioning. And I see backup keepers all the time in the Premier League who consistently nail the fundamentals from a positioning standpoint. And I don't
think he's a top 10 keeper in the Premier League.
And
I don't even think it's that. I don't even
think
it
would be on the bottom of that 10, but I don't know. It would be close. And I think it's not fair for us to say this, like comparing to, for example, Hermanson, because we don't know the same situations, right? Maybe if you put Hermanson behind like this team, because we've always talked about this too, being a goalie in a team where you're called to action 24/7 is very different than being a goalie in a team where you're going to have 2-3 moments and you're going to have to make the big save. Not everybody can do either or. And I hope he understands that, because he might be going to a team where he's called upon a lot more and might not do as well in that role. Because I think it's a lot harder to be a goalie in a top team where you might not have anything to do for longer spells but then gonna have that huge key moment that we're used to Ali saving our butt, for example, in a 1v1 and stuff.
That's
like
fair.
that.
No, it's fair. Listen, I've made this comment many times. I think he's a really good player. I think they missed it. I think they should have sold him 2 years ago when there were a couple bids out there of 28, 30 million. They were holding out for like 40. I think they almost bought into the own press clippings, and then they started to see it. The thing I will come back to 100%, no one has ever made a substantial real bid, because this guy has proven he would have tried to force his way out of this club if any other big club ever came with a real offer for him. And he would have forced himself out the way Vandenberg forced himself out, the way other players did. I'm not sure anyone's out there. And someone just mentioned it in the comment, the James Trafford. There is a keeper playing at Burnley right now that I'll guarantee 10 to 15 Premier League clubs would sell their number one keeper for. And that guy's at Burnley playing in the Championship. And he's a top keeper. I don't think the powers that be across world football compare Kelleher to Trafford. And that kid has had a year and a half at Burnley, one in the Championship and one getting relegated out of the Premier League. And I think if you gave Palace, Bournemouth, Brighton, and there's another one, Brighton, Verbruggen. There's so many different keepers, young keepers across Europe. And Kelleher's not young. That's the other thing. He's keeper age, he's young. But if you're questioning it, he's not. He needs to go play. But I think
honestly, to be fair to him, he probably
Ham.
should have gone 2 years ago, and he would be a starter right now. And we would know the answer to, can he be a regular starter at a Premier League team? I really think he can. I think he's done well, but it goes back to what I'm saying. How is he going to do when he's 24/7 being bombed with crosses and stuff like that into the box, as opposed to, being like a Liverpool keeper? But honestly, I think we're spoiled in terms of the performance we've gotten out of a backup keeper that we've relied on a lot, thanks to Ali's injury history. And that's another thing to consider in this whole goalie thing, is the fact that you're not going to having a backup goalie that you just tried out there for League Cup games and stuff like that. More than likely, you're going to rely on him for a month or two in the Premier League as well. But yeah, that's why it's going to be interesting summer overall. There's so many moving pieces. Let's get to Wednesday really quick and do this lineup over here. I think the back line, the goalkeeper, midfield speaks for itself. What are we doing in the front three, Bickler? Or are you doing any surprises in the back that I'm not expecting? It kind of feels like it fills itself, but
yeah, no, I'm not doing anything surprising out of the back. I think the front three, I'm probably going, I've been trying to think about what bothers me so much about the squad. I think what bothers me this year is that the best 11 isn't the best 11 players. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I think if I'm looking at a best 11, I'm probably got Diaz, Jota, and Mo in my front three, and I don't love it. So, I don't love the fact that Gakpo's not in there, but I don't want Diaz starting through the middle. I think Jota can do it. I think he has the ability to do it, and then you can bring Darwin on for chaos if you need to. But that's my front three. I'll stick with that.
Yeah, I second that motion, just because I don't know how ready Gakpo is to give you, 60, 70 yet and stuff like that. And I don't want him rushed in, I guess. And this is the fact that it's away, I think kind of makes things different too. Where are you at with that, Gally? Who are you starting up front?
I don't know if the manager actually has any faith in starting Jota in this match either, though, because he played one match and then needed to sit a second match after it, 72 hours later, because he wasn't fit again. So I worry that he has as much. I think he has more faith in Gakpo playing, and he did give him the back-to-back rests. I think it could be Gakpo on the left. I think it's a toss-up between Diaz and Jota through the middle, to be honest. I think one eye probably leans to Southampton, and to my point earlier, that should be a match where Darwin starts. You're playing at Southampton. You should be able to just give him a start, and that way you don't have to worry about him in this. I will say this. if you wanted my curveball from left field, I think there's a reason the manager played 2 different matches with 4 midfielders and only 2 attackers. And it was to see if he liked the jib, the way it looked. And I think there's a world where PSG might be the reason you started to try that out. Because you can get at their midfield by having 1 extra midfielder and crowding that space and running at them. And I think you use Jones's power and his Jones's ability, his composure on the ball, and then you use Soboslai's running power, and you basically just go at him. And in that world, I'd start Diaz and Mo and have my 2 speedster chickenless heads giving width, and then I'd have the midfielders running in between. And I think as the match went on and the tired legs of, Marquinhos is trying to defend these guys running in every different direction and following Soboslai into the box, and Jones as they go deep and drop back, I think that's when you can bring on Jota and even a Gakpo and actually go more of a traditional type of 4-3-3 that we play. And I think at that point, you might be able to get at them late with your kind of clinical players. Because let's be real, we come home with a 1-goal lead, this tie's dead to me, in my opinion. I almost feel like if you come home a draw, you're in a really, really good place having the second leg at Anfield. You just got to make sure you're not on the other end of like a 3-1, Dembele scores 2 worldies in the last 10 minutes of the match or something. Because to me, that's the only way. PSG has to play from the lead. Maybe you guys disagree, but I feel like them coming to Anfield.
But if you do that, who are you? Are you sitting Gravenberch or McAllister?
I'm starting all 4 midfielders, and
he's starting everybody on their brother. It's basically like the City lineup is what he's going with.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of see that.
City and Villa.
I say Diaz over Gakpo as you need somebody to keep Hakimi back for 1, and to come with Hakimi when he does come up for 2. And Gakpo is not that guy, I don't think, in this game. Maybe, if you do what you're saying, Gally, which is doable, I can see that. Then you can kind of have Diaz and stuff get run behind Hakimi when he pulls up.
And that wasn't I wasn't saying, like, if you told me to bet on my first 11 and I got to place a bet at Paddy Power, I'm going to bet Jota, Diaz, Mo, and then the same midfield and defenders. If you ask me for a curveball, I could see that same mentality of attack. The way you attack City feels very much like the way you would attack PSG on the road.
Bickler is contemplating. Are you sold, Bickler? Bickler is engaging this for the last 2 minutes.
The only thing I don't like about it is I think that you have to start Jones for Southampton, personally. So.
Yeah, I can
he's the
that.
guy.
It's a good theory. I buy the theory that Gally has there. Yeah. Honestly, I will be worried more against PSG if we were kind of doing the gung-ho system of Klopp, because they can hurt you on the counter. They got so much speed up top and stuff like that. Scared a bit less of those counters, like going back to what you're saying, Gally. If you come back with the leads, you're like, can get hit on the counter at Anfield or something like that. But yeah, I feel a bit more confident with this. But yeah, it will be interesting. How much? I was telling this to the Prince this morning. The fact that Premier League looks in hand and done almost, right? Knock on wood. Does this make this game a bit more of a let's see what happens? I don't know why I don't feel as much stress and pressure as I would knowing in our hierarchy of trophies we've already gotten the top 1. Are you guys the same way? What do you guys feel? You guys don't get as nervy as I do, but still. Nobody does. Well, Serzi. Thank God.
Nobody gets more nervy than Serzi. Even his doctor is nervous. He's nervous. He's going to get a house call on Sunday morning. And out there, it's 4:30 in the morning. I'll take a stab at it. I'm not any more nervous or less nervous. I hate this draw because I feel like you're playing a team. I feel like you're playing a team that has a lot of talent. They're the only side to not lose or who have not lost in their domestic league in all of Europe.
Yeah.
So And I know it's France, but they've improved as the season went on. They absolutely dismantled Manchester City over those 2 legs, especially in that second match. And I think they have one of the best football brains in Luis Enrique as their manager. And I think when you play a team like that, they can always show up and give you a tough time. And the other thing is I really, really want to win this tournament. Like, I really want the Champions League. I want another one. I want a deep run in this tournament. I want to take out revenge. I want to play Real Madrid in the semifinals. I want to beat Villa next round. Like, I like this draw because all I've heard all year is how Liverpool's getting lucky and Arsenal's hurt and red cards and City's down. No, but here's the thing. They can't say we got the easy draw because we got the hardest draw of any team to finish in the top 8. PSG is the best team that anyone is playing. And a win gives you Villa, and a win of that gives you Real Madrid or Arsenal. So, like, we have the tougher side of this Champions League draw. And I would love to see them get through the whole thing and get to the final, play Inter, play Bayern, play, Barca. To me, Liverpool is all about the Champions League. And I do feel like the league is kind of done. So I want this. I really want this. Like, and it starts on Wednesday.
How about you, Bickler? That sounds a lot more aggressive than where I'm at. I'm more like, let's see how it goes, kind of a thing. And I think that's because of the Premier League.
I just want to. I too want the Champions League, and I want it in convincing fashion too. Like, I feel like we've kind of drug over the line a few times. I would like to do it in convincing fashion. I think it's there for the taking. I think the toughest part about, I mean, Gally said it. I think the toughest part about PSG is their manager. I really do, and I think we finally got a manager who is tactically savvy enough to make adjustments on the fly. So yeah, I'd love to see it. It sets up nicely. So, I mean, hopefully we're sharp.
Early score prediction, Bickler?
I'll go 1-0 Liverpool.
Okay. Gally?
I'm going to go 2-1. I was going to call for a 1-1 draw, but I've talked myself into the positiveness of this pod. I'm going to say we win it 2-1, but I think the goals come from odd-ass places. Like, this doesn't feel like a Mo day. Like, this one feels like one where, like, one bounces off Diaz's face and, like, Konate jumps up for a header and it, like, hits off Robertson and goes in or something. Like, I feel like we get the win, but I think it's ugly, it's nervy. But in some ways, I almost feel like that will almost help this side go back home, reorganize, and kind of get it
I'm
right.
going to go with a 2-1 too. 2-1 sounds good to me. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I feel a lot more at ease with this for some reason, and I think it's like the Premier League effect to me, and I feel like, the League Cup is coming up and everything like that too. But of course, I say this come Wednesday, I'll be a nervous wreck. That's a different story. But okay, well, that's it for us this week, though. Do tune in tomorrow morning, bright and early, for the morning coffee or tea show. We'll probably talk more about the game. Hopefully we'll have the press conference as well before we go on air. But if you have not done already, hit that like button, go ahead and subscribe. And if you haven't done so, go grab somebody by the ear, bring their butt over, make them subscribe. And then a lot of new stuff coming your way with American Scouser soon. So let's get to the end of the year. This is going to be an awesome end to the year. The spring looks like so. And everybody wants a triple and stuff. You guys are really aggressive. Hey, more power to us. But have a great week, everybody. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care.